everyone, it's Katrina. Today, we are going on a journey to uncover mysterious ancient places that whisper secrets of the past and hold knowledge that has faded with time. These sites captivate our imagination and challenge our understanding of ancient civilizations. They spark questions about who built them, how were they constructed, and what secrets did they once protect. Some of these places were centers of learning and innovation, while others held spiritual or strategic significance. So let's see what we can find out. And then be sure to let me know which ancient place you wish you could see restored to its former glory. The Pergamon Altar. Prepare to be amazed by the Pergamon Altar, where legends come to life. Pergamon was an incredibly advanced city during ancient times. It was a powerful center of culture in Asia Minor, in present-day Turkey. And within the ruins of this ancient place, archaeologists found the mysterious altar. The monument is extremely impressive. It's not only huge, but it's also beautiful. It features a giant elevated platform with an elaborate frieze wrapping around it. The square-shaped platform is 118 feet wide with a depth of 111 feet. When it was first built, this thing was 66 feet tall. The first thing people notice about the altar is its frieze, which depicts a mythical battle called Gigantomachy. This was a legendary fight between the gods of Olympus and the giants, which should not be confused with the titans of Greek mythology. The giants weren't exactly known for their large stature, as you might expect. They were typically depicted as normal humans dressed in heavy armor. They were recognized as a powerful race of great aggression and strength, but they were no match for the gods. The frieze had 4 sides, with each one showing a different god or goddess defeating the giants. There is also the Telephus frieze that's located inside of the altar, which once surrounded the Pergamon altar's fire altar. This thing was like a Russian nesting doll of altars. People would burn sacrifices in the horseshoe-shaped fire, like the thighs of sacrificial animals. But more traditional gifts like wine, incense, and fruit were also offered to the gods here. The Telephus frieze is not nearly as impressive as the other one, but it's still incredible, even if it's incomplete. Only 47 partial panels of the original 74 panels have survived. It painted the story of Telephus, the son of Hercules, portraying several episodes from his life, including his birth, his childhood, and his famous encounter during the Trojan War with Achilles. The Pergamon altar as a whole was carved between 180 and 160 BC. It was built as a place of worship to the gods. It wasn't out of the ordinary for the Pergamese to construct monuments after winning major battles. However, this altar doesn't seem to resemble any other victory monuments discovered in Pergamon. So it's a bit of a mystery, as usual. The altar's design doesn't reference any military campaigns historians know about, but one detail really stood out to researchers: a star imprinted on the shields of some of the figures featured on the altar. This symbol is known as the Star of Macedonia. Some think that the star could represent the 12 gods of Olympus, but others think it's simply a decorative design. Sadly, it seems as though the secret of this symbol has been lost to time. The monument's dedication inscription thanks the gods for their favors, but what these favors were isn't clear. The current belief is that the altar was created to honor Zeus and Athena because they are the gods that are most represented in the monument's artwork. The Library of Nalanda. You have most likely heard of the Library of Alexandria, but what about the Library of Nalanda? Nalanda wasn't just a library, it was a great university. Not only were its books burned, but the keepers of this wisdom were also killed, which means they literally took their secrets to the grave. The library was vast and prolific, and it contained history that connected India to its past. In one night, 800 years of knowledge just vanished. All that remains are some soot-covered bricks that were used to build this legendary place. Nalanda was interesting because it was arguably the first of its kind, providing living facilities to its students. The university took on a Gurukul model of education, which is based on the belief that students should be close to their guru, the source of their wisdom. Get it? Guru, Gurukul? A fire devoured the ancient halls of Nalanda, where some of the greatest minds of the time gathered to explore the depths of philosophy, spirituality, and mathematics. This place was a revered center of education, nurturing scholars who would go on to shape the very course of history. But then came the invaders. Turkish aggressors mercilessly burned Nalanda to the ground in 1197 AD. But they didn't just destroy buildings. They obliterated centuries of accumulated knowledge. They reduced the books to ashes and beheaded the monks in their ruthless bid to silence the voice of enlightenment. Nalanda stood tall for 8 centuries, but the Turks didn't care. So what exactly was lost in the Inferno? Well, the knowledge wouldn't exactly be lost if researchers could answer that question. What scholars know about Nalanda comes from the stories passed down from travelers who stayed and studied at the school. This place was open to everyone of all cultures and religions. When these travelers left, they took with them manuscripts and books that were full of valuable pieces of information. These are the only surviving texts from Nalanda, describing ancient Buddhist knowledge and Indian philosophy. Nalanda was established during the Gupta Empire between the 3rd and 6th centuries. Today, its ruins are located near the city of Rajgir in India. Nalanda has been listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It has also been recognized as an Institute of National Importance by the Indian government since 2010. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to Felipe Martel for the generous super thanks. It really means a lot! If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni. Secrets from the most ancient underground temple in the world have recently come to light thanks to researchers, and you won't believe what they found out. The temple is known as the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, and it's located on the island of Malta. This subterranean structure is known for bizarre discoveries, like mysterious elongated skulls. Visitors have also shared stories of paranormal phenomena after exploring this place. But what has really intrigued experts about the temple is its unique acoustic properties. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni dates back 5,000 years. It's important because it's the only example of a Bronze Age subterranean structure that researchers know of. The temple is made up of 3 levels, all of which contain a series of elliptical chambers. The most significant chambers stand out because they have domed ceilings and elaborately decorated entranceways. Although nobody knows for sure, this place is thought to have initially been used as a sanctuary, maybe for an oracle. And that's why one of the temple's rooms has been named the Oracle Chamber. The room is carved out of solid limestone, and there's something going on here with sound. Sound was extremely important to the ancient world, and we know the effect that sounds can have on the human body and mind. Any word that's spoken in the oracle chamber is said to be magnified 100-fold and can be heard throughout the entire temple. Words echoed loudly in the dark and mysterious labyrinth structure, making a frightening impression on all of those who heard them. Imagine visiting this place 5,000 years ago with an oracle chanting and the words echoing all around you. It would feel as if the gods themselves might be speaking to you. It was a very powerful place. Standing in the Hypogeum has been compared to being inside of a giant bell. At certain pitches, a person can feel the sound waves vibrating in their tissues and bones, as well as in their ears. Some people probably thought that this place was magical, or like it was maybe haunted by the spirits of the dead. The acoustics in the Hypogeum have been extensively studied. A research team from Italy, led by Maltese composer Ruben Zara, found out that sound resonates within the oracle chamber at 110 Hz. And guess what? This matches the frequency that's been found in several other ancient chambers around the globe. Coincidence? I think not. Dr. Robert John from Princeton University believes that the quality of the stone or the dimensions of the room determines the exact pitch of this echo behavior. But was achieving 110 Hz intentional by the ancient architects of this place? Was the Hypogeum designed in such a way to enhance amplification? And if so, why? Could the designers of these underground spaces have known something that modern scientists are just now rediscovering? Clearly, there are still a lot of questions that need to be answered. Scientists from Italian universities believe that the chamber was built in a way to produce acoustics that would affect people's psyche. They believe that the chamber could have been designed to enhance mystical experiences during certain rituals. And amazingly, there is scientific evidence to back up this theory. Dr. Ian Cook from UCLA published his findings with the help of his colleagues in 2008. He conducted an experiment in which he monitored regional brain activity in several healthy volunteers as they were being exposed to different resonance frequencies. When these people were exposed to 110 hertz, the part of the brain responsible for language suddenly became less active, and the part responsible for processing emotions became more dominant on the right side of their brains compared to their left side. This bizarre reaction didn't happen with sounds at other frequencies. Isn't that strange and amazing? This means that people who spent time in the hypogeum in the past, whether intentionally or not, were subjecting themselves to vibrations that may have affected their thoughts. Being surrounded by vibrations at a frequency of 110 hertz boosted their creativity. It also activated a part of their brain that's linked to mood, social behavior, and empathy. While we may never know for sure what happened within the hypogeum of Halsaflieni 5,000 years ago, scientists are slowly getting closer to unraveling the mysteries of this incredible ancient site. This place is definitely on my bucket list. How about you? The burning of Persepolis. Let me tell you about the time that Alexander the Great burned the entire city of Persepolis to the ground, destroying hundreds of years worth of buildings and art and ancient texts. He did this after looting the city for treasure, but books and scrolls? They were simply used as fuel for the ensuing inferno. Alexander conquered the Achaemenid Persian Empire in the year 330 BC, following his victory over Darius III, the Persian emperor. Once Darius was down, Alexander marched his army to the city of Persepolis, and you know what happened next. At the time, Persepolis was the capital city of the Persian Empire. It was full of audience halls where important ceremonies and gatherings took place, as well as magnificent palaces. The city was built between 518 and 515 BC under the leadership of Darius I, the Great. He was the one who established Persepolis as the capital of the empire, and as a result, some of the greatest literary works and art pieces created by the Persians were housed within the city. But unfortunately, Alexander knew this. Darius I's successor, Xerxes I, sort of kicked off the feud between the Greeks and the Persians in 480 BC. He burned down Greek cities, villages, and temples, including the Parthenon of Athens. He kept going on this rampage until he was finally defeated at the Battle of Salamis, and again at the Battle of Plataea. The Persian invasion of 480 BC was remembered by the Greeks, and Alexander made it his personal mission to end the rivalry once and for all. But apparently, the decision to torch Persepolis could have been influenced by alcohol. Every single account of this story notes that when Alexander and his men decided to destroy the Persian capital, they were absolutely wasted. Apparently, they burned down the whole city along with its historical and religious texts as part of a twisted, drunken game. Alexander said, "Hold my mead," and then lit the place on fire. At the time, he and his army probably thought it was funny, but their perspective changed when they sobered up. All that remains of Persepolis today are 40 columns that once supported the roof of a luxurious palace. When Alexander arrived, Persepolis was one of the most impressive places in the world. But when he was done with it, the city was nothing but a ruin that for generations became known as the Place of 40 Columns. The religious texts of early Zoroastrianism, scribbled on goatskin parchment, went up in the flames. And along with them went priceless tapestries, artworks, and loads of other cultural treasures, some of which have been recognized as irreplaceable. It's said that Alexander the Great regretted his decision to burn Persepolis after waking up the next morning, likely with a pretty terrible hangover. As someone with an interest in science and the arts, he couldn't believe that he had destroyed such an immense accumulation of ancient Persian knowledge and art and culture. It was sort of the thing to do back then. If you conquered someone, usually you burned everything to the ground. But in Alexander's case, he usually took over the city and appreciated what other cultures had done. The whole thing with Darius must have really gotten under his skin. Italy's underground pyramids. Here's something you might not know. Italy has its very own pyramids, similar to the ones in Egypt, but there is just one big difference. The Italian pyramids were built underground, in the middle of a cave system. Archaeologists were puzzled when they found the first ever pyramid-like buildings built by the Etruscans beneath an Italian city. In 2011, a group of American and Italian archaeologists started digging under a wine cellar in Orvieto. They found stairs that were made in the Etruscan style, and this led them to uncover tunnels and caves as they dug deeper through layers of walls and floors from different historical periods. These underground chambers had walls that sloped upwards, resembling the shape of a pyramid. David B. George from St. Anselm College and his colleagues have no clue what these things are. Sure, they look like pyramids, but what function did they serve for the Etruscans? The Etruscans built numerous underground paths and cave chambers, but this discovery stood out because it was the first time they had found ones with such a unique shape. These chambers have a narrow top that gradually widens into a square base, which sets them apart from others that have been previously discovered. The Etruscans are a bit of a historical mystery. They appeared as a sophisticated civilization around 900 BC in central Italy. They introduced art, advanced metalwork, trade, and writing to Europe and the Mediterranean. However, their society didn't last. They eventually became part of the Roman Empire, which makes it hard for us to understand their culture because there aren't many clues left behind. The underground pyramids have since been explored by archaeologists, who have dug down about 49 feet so far. But a lot of the site was deliberately filled in a long time ago for reasons unknown, maybe to protect it or to hide it. But as they cleared away this filling material, they excavated several interesting artifacts. They discovered over 150 inscriptions written in the Etruscan language, as well as various decorative and architectural clay objects. They also found out that the site was sealed off near the end of the 5th century BC, likely in one single event. Whoever did this was smart, probably trying to keep everything safe from invaders. And it's great for us now. That action helped protect and preserve this place like a time capsule. Digging at the Cavità in nearby locations has uncovered ceramic items, large bowls, statues, and other artifacts. Altogether, researchers think there are at least 5 similar pyramids under the city. Researchers are still puzzled by the Etruscan pyramids, speculating whether they served as religious buildings or tombs. Speaking to Discovery News, one team member said that the answers they are searching for are likely deep underground. The challenge is that they are not sure how far down they need to dig in order to find them. Adam's Calendar. Now let's dive into the fascinating world of Adam's Calendar, which has been labeled by some as the oldest man-made structure on the planet. It's a stone circle that's way older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid of Giza. This thing is absolutely ancient. So, where exactly is this marvel located? It's nestled in Mpumalanga, South Africa, and it's about 98 feet in diameter. To put that into perspective, it's roughly the size of a basketball court. Some folks even call it the African Stonehenge. This thing is estimated to be over 75,000 years old, when humans were supposedly simple hunter-gatherers. A local pilot named Johan Heine was the one who brought Adam's Calendar to the public's attention in 2003 after crashing his plane. Heine noticed massive dolomite stones and a giant stone circle after exiting the plane. So not only did he survive a plane crash, he also made a groundbreaking discovery. Talk about luck. And guess what? This stone circle has a purpose. Based on its name, you can most likely guess what it is. That's right, it's a fully functional calendar. Our ancient ancestors were using this to track the movement of the sun. Unfortunately, though, nobody knows for sure who built Adam's Calendar or how they did it. And just when you thought it couldn't get any weirder, scientists have discovered that the rocks beneath Adam's Calendar are humming with mysterious sound frequencies. It's like the Earth itself is singing a secret song. Using advanced technology, scientists have found a way to identify and measure the sound frequencies produced by the Earth beneath the circles. Pretty cool, right? These frequencies can conduct electricity, creating patterns resembling sacred geometric shapes like flowers as they emerge from the ground. So, what's the deal with Adam's Calendar? How did someone manage to construct such a precise structure without modern tools? It's a mystery that's been confusing scientists for ages. But hey, that's what makes the site so fascinating. Lovelock Cave. Did giants once live in North America? According to some discoveries from a Nevada cave, maybe. A Native American tribe called the Paiutes once inhabited certain parts of Nevada, and when early white settlers arrived in the area, the Paiutes shared with them their oral tradition. They told the settlers stories of red-haired giants or barbarians that their ancestors called the Siteka. The tale was so incredible that it was turned into a book, written by the daughter of a Paiute Indian chief in 1882. If you want to check out that book, it's called Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims. These so-called giants were said to be a vicious and unfriendly group, and to make them even more terrifying, they were cannibals. But the Paiutes were brave and exterminated them once and for all. They challenged the barbarians to a battle, which allegedly took place at a site known as Lovelock Cave. This was all just a myth until archaeologists made a startling find in the cave during the early part of the 20th century. They discovered not just hundreds, but thousands of artifacts, which led some to believe that the whole story about giants was 100% true. Siteka, or Saiduka in the northern Paiute language, translates as tool eaters. But what does tool mean? Tool is a fiber-rich water plant which, according to myth, was used by giants to weave together rafts in order to escape the Paiute attacks. They allegedly used these rafts to navigate the ancient lake Lahontan, which during the last ice age covered much of northern Nevada. As the story goes, after years of constant conflict, all the Native American tribes in the region joined forces to rid themselves of the pesky giants. The giants hid in a cave, hoping not to be found, but the Paiutes know exactly where they were and demanded that they come out and fight. The giants refused. So what do you think happened next? Left with no other choice, they started a large fire in front of the cave's entrance. Some of the Siteka were driven out and died in a barrage of arrows, while the rest of them either burned alive or suffocated in the fumes. That was it. The last of the giants of North America were finally gone. Over time, the mouth of the cave collapsed, closing it off from human contact. That is, until 1886, when John T. Reed, a mining engineer, was shown the cave by local Indians. It took a while for Reed to get an archaeological dig going, but eventually, in 1911, miners David Pugh and James Hart started a company to begin the process. They knew that guano was a valuable ingredient of gunpowder, and they knew that the cave was full of the stuff. Anything else they found in the cave? Well, that was just a bonus. The men were right. The cave was covered in bat droppings. But more importantly, it contained prehistoric artifacts. So Pugh and Hart contacted the founder of the University of California Anthropology Department, Alfred Kroeber. In 1912, the first real excavation of Lovelock Cave began, followed by a second dig in 1929. What he found is going to shock you. His team uncovered about 10,000 archaeological artifacts, including bones, tools, weapons, and baskets. The bones were particularly interesting. According to a report, they unearthed 60 average-sized mummies, but some claim that the mummified remains of 2 giants were also found. One was a man over 8 feet tall, and the other was a woman at 6.5 feet tall. Was this proof the legends were real? It's hard to tell because all physical proof of this discovery has disappeared. Evidence shows that humans started living in Lovelock Cave around 1500 BC. Nowadays, anthropologists refer to these people as the Lovelock culture, who hung around the area for about 3,000 years. This place is now known as one of the most important sites of North American archaeological history. Whether it was once occupied by giants, however, remains a mystery. The mysterious underground spring. Get ready to dive deep into the mystery of an underground spring in France that seemingly has an endless supply of water. Deep in the heart of France's Burgundy region lies a place shrouded in mystery, the Fosse Dion Well. It's a never-ending flow of water, gushing and swirling in shades of turquoise, blue, and brown. But where does it all come from? That's the question that has puzzled people for centuries. Legends say that the Romans once drank from this mystical spring. Even the Celts believed it held sacred powers. In the 1700s, locals used it as a communal washhouse. But tales of what lay beneath the surface captured their imaginations. Did a deadly serpent guard its depths? Was it a gateway to another realm? No one knew for sure. In 1974, 2 brave divers attempted to uncover its secrets, but they never returned. 22 years later, another diver met the same fate. For decades, the Fosse Dion remained a mystery, its depths too treacherous to explore. there. Then, in a daring move in October 2019, the mayor of the town hired a professional diver, Pierre-Eric Dessen. With nerves of steel, Pierre-Eric descended into the abyss, venturing deeper than anyone before him. Yet even with modern technology and his courageous efforts, he still failed to locate the source of the legendary spring. He reached an impressive depth of 230 feet, but it was all for nothing. So, what lies hidden beneath the tranquil surface of the Fosse Dion? Is it a forgotten world waiting to be discovered, or simply nature's mysterious creation? Until someone unlocks its secrets, the ancient well will just keep on gushing out water, as it has been for centuries. The House of Wisdom. In the heart of ancient Baghdad, amidst the busy markets and grand palaces, stood a beacon of knowledge, the House of Wisdom. Founded by Caliph Harun al-Rashid in the 8th century, it became a sanctuary for scholars from across the Islamic Empire. But what secrets did this revered institution hold? Picture a bustling city, its streets alive with the exchange of ideas and cultures. This was Baghdad during the Islamic Golden Age. The House of Wisdom stood at its center, a testament to the Abbasid dynasty's commitment to learning and discovery. Scholars of all backgrounds gathered within its walls, sharing knowledge and advancing the frontiers of science, mathematics, philosophy, and medicine. If only they knew what was coming. At the House of Wisdom, ancient texts from Greece, Persia, and beyond were translated and preserved for future generations. Scholars studied the works of Plato, Aristotle, and Ptolemy, unlocking the secrets of the universe. They developed revolutionary theories in astronomy, mathematics, and medicine, laying the groundwork for centuries of scientific advancement. But as the centuries passed, the House of Wisdom's influence waned. Political turmoil and internal strife rocked the Abbasid Empire, and Baghdad's glory began to fade. Then, in the 13th century, disaster struck when the Mongol army laid siege to the city. Led by Hulin Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, the Mongols unleashed a devastating assault. The once proud capital was plunged into chaos as Mongol hordes swept through the streets, leaving destruction in their wake. The House of Wisdom, with its vast library of manuscripts and scrolls, became a prime target for destruction. Everyone fled for their lives as flames engulfed the ancient building, consuming centuries of knowledge in a fiery inferno. As the city burned, the river Tigris ran black with the ink of countless books and red with the blood of scholars. It was a scene of unimaginable horror, as centuries of intellectual achievement were reduced to ashes. The destruction of the House of Wisdom marked the end of an era, as Baghdad's status as a center of learning was lost forever. Petroglyph Beach. Prepare to rethink everything you thought you knew about Alaska and its ancient past. In the remote and mysterious regions of North America lies Wrangell, a small coastal city in Alaska. This area, once home to the Tlingit native tribe, holds a treasure trove of history etched into its rocky shores. Petroglyph Beach, just a mile from town, boasts one of the highest concentrations of ancient rock carvings in North America. A whopping 40 to 50 intricate designs can be found here, some dating back 8,000 years. But who carved them, and why? Wrangell itself is a humble fishing town nestled amidst breathtaking wilderness, where towering mountains meet lush forests and rugged coastlines. Petroglyph Beach, though unassuming, is a hotspot for history buffs and adventurers alike. These petroglyphs, or stone carvings, are a window into the past, offering clues about the ancient people who once called this land home. Experts have long debated the origins of these mysterious carvings. Were they crafted by the Tlingit, the indigenous people who inhabited the area for millennia? Or perhaps by the Haida, whose ancestors may have voyaged from distant islands off the coast of Canada to leave their mark on Wrangell shores? Some even suggest they were made by Paleo-Indians, the earliest inhabitants of the region. The petroglyphs themselves are a mix of styles and symbols, ranging from simple spirals and dots to elaborate depictions of animals like killer whales, salmon, and ravens. Each carving tells a story, a testament to the importance of these creatures in the lives of the ancient people, but their true meaning remains a mystery. As coastal erosion takes its toll, some of these ancient carvings now lie below the waterline, visible only at low tide, and yet they continue to intrigue researchers. Despite centuries of study, the origins of these petroglyphs remains elusive. Even modern Tlingit scholars are baffled by these ancient carvings, which predate their own tribal history. Who do you think left the mysterious petroglyphs on the Alaskan beach? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching! Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Be sure to stick around for an older video that you might have missed.
Cambur Castle. Cambur Castle in England was constructed at the request of Henry VIII in 1512. You remember Henry VIII with all the wives. It was designed as an innovative defensive structure, and because Henry VIII was obsessed with gunpowder, it was also one of the first English castles to use cannons in its defense. These are called Henrician castles or device forts, and were the precursors to the larger, more robust military fortresses that came in later centuries. Cambur Castle is special because it was uniquely designed by the Italian engineer Stefan von Haschenberg. It may be an English castle, but anyone with a keen eye for architecture can spot its Italian influences. It was meant to be a port castle where the English fleet could hide behind. Unfortunately, no ship ever had the chance to use the castle as a sanctuary because by the time it was completed in 1544, the castle's advanced design was already obsolete. It was only used as a military fortress until the 1550s, then was completely abandoned in 1637. One of the major issues was that by the 1600s, the sea had receded quite a bit. The sea level had fallen so much that the cannons that were installed in the fortress were no longer able to fire at invading ships. It was totally useless and became nothing but a fancy picnic area in the 18th and 19th centuries. And today, it is just a shell of its former glory. Lake Shawnee. The Lake Shawnee Amusement Park is a place of great terror, an abandoned theme park with a daunting past. In fact, the story of the park goes all the way back to the 18th century. A man named Mitchell Clay brought his family to West Virginia in the late 1700s. Disaster struck in 1783 when a Native American tribe killed 2 of his children, even burning one at the stake. The farmer retaliated with help from the other settlers, and they tracked down the Native Americans and massacred them all. Fast forward to 1920, someone got the bright idea to build a theme park on this same piece of property. The park was up and running by 1929, complete with children's swings, a water slide, a dance hall for teenagers, and a speakeasy for the adults. There was even a pond and a swimming hole, and you could rent a canoe for the day and paddle around. But the terror never ended. A little girl died on one of the swings, a boy drowned in the pond, and by 1966, half a dozen visitors had been killed in mysterious accidents. The attraction was abandoned, and it's still abandoned to this very day. People only found out in the 1980s that the park was built over the remains of a Native American burial ground, but that might explain why the place seemed to be cursed. Cultist Voodoo Temple. Evidence of sinister activity was recently discovered by a couple of workers that were cleaning the inside of an abandoned Colorado tool shed. The shed was filled with human remains, skeleton masks, broken animal horns, and other items that seemed to suggest it had been used as a voodoo temple for practitioners of the occult. This disturbing sight was made by the cleaners who were sent in to prepare the deserted property to be sold. The widow who lived there had moved out several months ago, and so the land was being put up for sale. And even though the woman had been living there, she hadn't stepped foot inside the tool shed for over 15 years since her husband left her and moved to Panama. She had no idea what was going on in there, but apparently it was being used by some kind of cult. The cleaners discovered a machete, a mysterious scepter, a disgusting brown wig, some antlers, and a mannequin dressed in purple robes, but it was the human remains that made them call the police. Officers uncovered parts of a human skull and some leg bones, all of which belonged to an unidentified man. Last we heard, no one has any real knowledge of what kind of ominous activity took place here, but judging by everything that's been found, the shed had been turned into the scene of some kind of ritual slaughter. Either that, or the human bones had been purchased on the internet to be used in a voodoo ritual. Grain Tower. Grain Tower was built in the 19th century as a gun tower to protect the dockyards of Sheerness and Chatham. These dockyards can be found in Kent in the United Kingdom. The full name of this abandoned place is the Grain Tower Battery, constructed on the shores of the River Thames after the brutal Napoleonic Wars. At this particular spot, there is no way to move up the river without passing by the tower. This made it a great strategic defensive point just in case the French tried to send their ships along the English coast to attack the shipbuilding yards, but it never really ended up being used for much. It was built on a tidal sandbank, meaning it was only accessible during low tide by walking along the exposed causeway. Because of its weird position and the severe weather here, construction took nearly 10 years, and when it was finally completed, it was way over budget. The tower consisted of 3 stories, stood 42 feet tall, with its walls over 12 feet thick. It was intended to be a barracks for the soldiers, with about 20 men inside watching over the river. But like so many things that were built in the 19th century, it was out of date soon after completion. A new type of gun had just come into existence, rendering all the guns installed inside the tower useless. There was talk to modernize the tower, but it would have cost too much money, so it was abandoned until 1915, when new guns were installed to deal with German torpedo boats. It became important again in World War II, but after the last war it was decommissioned. By 1956, it was a forgotten ruin. The cursed super yacht. In 1976, a super yacht was built for an American industrialist named Roy Carver. The yacht was designed by Arthur DeFever and Doug Sharp, a pair of renowned naval architects. The design was so complicated that Carver never actually took possession of the yacht. He went and bought himself a different one because he was sick of waiting, and then he died from a heart attack in 1981. His original yacht was eventually sold to the Sultan of Sabah in Malaysia, then passed on to another rich Malaysian, and then was purchased in 1999 and shipped to South Africa. Once there, it was to be extensively repaired and refitted. The issue was that the new owner apparently got bored and never made the necessary payments. The project was halted and the boat was left abandoned. It then sat neglected and cursed for 20 years in the Cape Town harbor. It became part of the landscape, a forgotten ship that no one seemed able to hold on to. Even now, the ship's just sitting in limbo, half taken apart with little left except its steel hull and aluminum superstructure. The Navajo National Monument. The Navajo National Monument isn't just one abandoned place. The National Monument is made up of a series of ancient dwellings that were abandoned centuries ago by the mysterious ancestral Puebloan people in Arizona. There are 3 major settlements here overlooking the Betatacan Canyon system, along with some smaller villages spread across the desert, which was once the Anasazi homeland. The Anasazi, also known as the Puebloans, were an ancient culture that lived all throughout Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. We know that their cities emerged sometime around the 12th century, or about 800 years ago. They established a massive population here in the dusty red canyons of the south and developed a complicated network of roads and paths connecting upwards of 100 communities. However, they all mysteriously vanished without a trace. The 3 main abandoned centers here are Keat Steel, Betatacan, and the Inscription House. Each major population center was constructed using the natural alcoves of the huge sandstone cliffs. The Anasazi built their homes in the shadows of these alcoves, constructing rudimentary houses from sandstone blocks and mud. Each small settlement could contain anywhere from 80 to about 150 people. The real mystery is why these places were abandoned. Based on climatic evidence, it's probable that the region suffered a major drought starting around the year 1299. It's likely that they ran out of water, that the crops stopped growing, and they had no choice but to push south. The Anasazi probably migrated into what would become the Aztec territory of Mexico. Do you believe that Anasazi migrated, or do you think it was something else that made them vanish into thin air? Let me know in the comments below. The Belle Isle Nature Zoo. The Belle Isle Nature Zoo in Detroit is a sad and abandoned park sitting next to a polluted river. Belle Isle itself is an extremely popular summer destination for thousands of people in Detroit, people who flock to what little natural options they have for picnics and swimming. But outside the main tourist area, down an almost invisible overgrown path, there is an abandoned children's zoo from the 20th century. That was when Belle Isle was the home of the Detroit Zoo. People could come to visit tiger cubs, elephants, monkeys, and all kinds of other exotic animals. In 1956, the main zoo moved to Royal Oak. This left the infrastructure at Belle Isle useless, so it became a children's zoo. In the 1980s, the zoo changed its name to Safariland, and in June of that same year, a bear escaped, swam across the Detroit River, and fled into the Canadian wilderness. By 2002, the zoo wasn't making enough money to maintain itself. There was no funding, and so they were forced to shut down. But because nobody seems interested in the property, nothing has ever been done with it. The state of Michigan has no plans of restoring the zoo, and so all the old animal enclosures are still rotting away in this forbidden part of the island, and have been for over 15 years. The Canada Village. Nestled in the southern Chinese province of Kaiping is the abandoned Canada Village. Its story is one of the most fascinating of any abandoned village in the world. Construction here began in 1923 by Chinese nationals who just returned from Canada. This large group of people had been part of the industrial boom in Canada in the early 20th century and took what money they had made back to China with them. The pioneers purchased the land, built fantastic mansions inspired by European architecture, and created a whole village. These were huge houses with balconies and strong, thick walls. Plus, the whole village was protected by a 5-story watchtower. The village thrived like any remote Chinese village up until the 1940s. That was when things started to go downhill. By the early 1950s, most of the residents of the village had migrated back to Canada. So it was originally built by people who returned from Canada, but 20 years later, they all decided to go back. They abandoned their properties, moved to the north, and the whole village was left deserted. In 2007, Canada Village was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Kaya Koy. Kaya Koy is a creepy abandoned ghost town in Turkey. It's been desolate and without human life since 1923. These days, it's a popular destination for tourists looking for haunted stone houses. The village was once home to roughly 10,000 people, a mixture of Muslims and Greek Orthodox Christians that lived in a remarkably harmonious community. The village came into existence around the 14th century, and it remained as a peaceful town up until the Greco-Turkish War of 1919. By the time the war was finished in 1923, the town was empty. The reason is kind of complex. During the war, the Greeks and the Turks decided that they would exchange Muslim and Christian citizens so that each country could have one major religion. In other words, each nation would be strictly Christian or strictly Muslim. The Greeks took back all their Orthodox citizens, and the Muslims stayed in Turkey. The result was that the village of Kaya Koy was abandoned pretty much overnight. 6,000 Christians marched out of town and migrated to Greece, and so everyone else left too. Ever since, the place has been a neglected ruin. Forgotten South Carolina. The colonial Dorchester State Historic Site dates back to 1697. That was when this South Carolina town, called Dorchester, was a bustling hub of activity. Today, it's simply a 325-acre historic site that's been abandoned since the Revolutionary War. But over 300 years ago, this was a shining jewel of colonial South Carolina. The few ruins that remain include an old brick bell tower from the St. George's Anglican Church, an overgrown cemetery with at least 20 burial plots, and an old log shipping wharf. This city was one of the very first places settled by the Puritan descendants known as Congregationalists. They sailed from Massachusetts to Carolina and started this trading town on their own. Everything was going swell until the Revolutionary War started in 1775. By the time it ended in 1783, everyone had been pushed out of the town. It was abandoned and the whole place became overgrown by forest. It was lost and completely forgotten. It wasn't until recently that the archaeological ruins were found and the place was turned into a protected site. The entire village had been hidden in the South Carolina woods for centuries, something you'd typically expect to see somewhere deep in the Amazon, not in the United States. Mystery Saxon Sarcophagus. During renovations at England's Lincoln Castle in 2013, archaeologists discovered a stone sarcophagus near the ruins of a previously unknown church on the property. They believed the casket contained the remains of somebody terribly important, perhaps a Saxon king or a bishop. When the team opened the sarcophagus, they found a skeleton wearing leather boots, but the only way to have any idea who the person was or when they were buried was to run further tests. Researchers determined the bones belonged to a man who likely died during his 40s, sometime between 1035 and 1070. He suffered from degenerative bone diseases and was probably in considerable pain, according to project manager Mary Powell, who spoke with the BBC. It's unclear whether the team identified the man, but the rare discovery of an undisturbed grave from the little-studied Anglo-Saxon period is nevertheless a valuable find. The research team found many important items at the site, including the limestone sarcophagus and a Roman bronze eagle's wing from the 1st century AD. The treasures will now be a part of a very important exhibition. Forest inside a sinkhole. Scientists recently announced the discovery of a 630-foot deep sinkhole with an ancient forest at the bottom in southern China's Guangxi Shuang Autonomous Region. As a size reference, 630 feet is about half the length of the Empire State Building. This area is famous for sinkholes and caves. This particular one is rare because it is very deep, but enough light filters in, which allows the large trees to grow. A team ventured into the hole and immersed themselves in the dense, chest-high vegetation, where they found trees measuring as high as 131 feet tall. That's 2.5 times as tall as the Hollywood sign. They also found 3 entrances to the cave. Sinkholes and caves are formed when rainwater dissolves bedrock, causing it to collapse. It's an environment that's truly untouched by humans and may contain undiscovered species of plants and animals. When a sinkhole is big enough to let in light, it helps plants grow and life continues to flourish. Some have become safe havens for wildlife, lost worlds where people can't reach. The newly discovered forest marks one of the 30 sinkholes scientists have found in the region, which is a designated UNESCO World Heritage Site. Ancient underground complex. In 2017, Turkish authorities learned of a planned looting in Bashbuk in the country's southern region, where a group of criminals discovered an Iron Age complex under someone's home. Luckily, police stopped the looters from putting their plan into action and alerted local archaeologists. They found a 12 by 7 foot opening that had recently been uncovered and went inside to look around. After performing tests, they dated the subterranean complex to the 9th century BC, to the Neo-Assyrian period. It consists of an upper and lower galley containing rare artwork on the walls, depicting a procession of Assyrian deities, as well as Aramaic writing. Unfortunately, the team could only uncover part of the complex before excavations were put on hold due to the site's instability. In the meantime, it's being protected by Turkey's Culture and Tourism Ministry. They have not yet found the site's original entrance and aren't entirely sure what this structure was used for. Researchers were able to identify 3 of the gods on the panel, including the god of thunder and storms, Hadad. This led them to believe that the complex possibly functioned as a ritual site for an ancient fertility cult. It's shout-out time! I wanted to give a big shout-out to Rhaegor Lamont and Bibi. Thanks so much for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe for more videos about amazing discoveries. Leprosy in the Caribbean. The small island of Petite Moustique in the Caribbean may have been home to an early 19th century leper colony. This uninhabited island measures just 100 acres. It's part of the group of islands collectively known as St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The island has lots of hills and there are no easy boat landing areas or large beaches, so it wasn't great for a permanent settlement. But people have passed through there, as archaeologists learned in 2003 when they found a human skull on Petite Moustique. Experts recently dated it to sometime during the late 18th or early 19th century. They discovered cranial deformities that are consistent with leprosy. It's the earliest known solid evidence of the disease in the Americas, and one of just a handful of examples of leprosy being identified on a skeleton in the Western Hemisphere. It made sense back in the day to drop people off in this isolated place to keep them away from everyone else. Leprosy has historically been stigmatized because it's a visible condition that causes the hands, feet, and face to become noticeably disfigured. This stigma persists in some parts of the world today, even though leprosy is curable thanks to modern medicine. So when people were taken to places like Petite Moustique and cut off from the rest of society, it wasn't just out of fear of pathogens spreading, but to keep those unfortunate souls out of sight and out of mind. Backyard skeleton. A homeowner in the Wellington, New Zealand suburb of Wadestown was recently taking care of her yard when she discovered a human skull buried less than a foot underground. It had no signs of trauma or decapitation around the time of death, despite being separated from the rest of the person's body. Police spoke with many experts who were able to trace the skull's origins back to a century ago. A former resident of the home told investigators he had discarded it, and a forensic examination verified it was a medical sample. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Angela Clark told the New Zealand Herald that it's impossible to perform reliable radiocarbon dating analysis on bones that are less than a century old. This is because of the radiation effects of atomic bomb testing during the 20th century. She said that it wasn't entirely unusual for someone to discover skulls that were used as medical specimens and turn them into her office. This leads her to believe that the person who buried it may have simply not known what else to do with it. As disturbing as it is to come across something like that, the motives aren't always sinister. It's been illegal in Wadestown for more than a century to bury people in graves outside cemeteries, according to historian Gabor Toth. He explained that any such burials required a special permit, that there weren't many, and this wasn't one of them. Someone probably happened to have it in their possession and simply wanted to get rid of it. Who would you call first if you found a skull in your yard? Let me know in the comments below. Persian cup in Siberia. While monitoring the melting permafrost on Siberia's Gadan Peninsula in 2016, a team of scientists discovered a fragment of a medieval bronze cup in Iran. It's the furthest north that a Persian artifact has ever been found in Siberia. This was the first time a discovery of its kind happened north of the Arctic Circle, according to researcher Andrei Gusev, who spoke with the Siberian Times. In addition to the cup, the team unearthed a ceramic pot and a bronze knife handle. Researchers believe the cup was made sometime during the 10th or 11th century before being brought to Siberia around 200 years later. Found roughly 2,300 miles from where it was made, the artifact shows the vast trade networks that existed in a world where traveling took much longer in the absence of modern technology. Asian merchants appeared in modern-day Russia's Upper Kama region during the 6th and 7th centuries, according to scientist Dr. Arkady Baulo. They exchanged their wares for fur, walrus tusks, and hunting birds, which then made their way to Asia. Persian imports were highly valued among the indigenous Khanty and Mansi groups. They assigned ritual meaning to the objects, keeping them in holy places and offering them as gifts to their gods and spirits. They also used Persian dishes during festivals to serve ceremonial foods to the gods. Discoveries like this may become more common as the permafrost melts, and this is just one example of how the changing world is revealing ancient relics in places where we never expected to find them. A whale in Vermont. While building a railroad in the landlocked state of Vermont back in 1849, a crew of workers was shocked to find a beluga whale skeleton. At first, nobody could explain why or how the remains of an ocean-dwelling creature were discovered in a farmer's field in the small town of Charlotte, roughly 200 miles away from the nearest ocean shoreline. Known as the Charlotte whale, it's one of several whale carcasses that have turned up in Vermont, leaving authorities, experts, and residents baffled. Lacking any other likely explanation, some people saw the discoveries as evidence of the biblical flood described in the Old Testament. But there was a logical conclusion in the works even before the Charlotte whale was discovered. Swiss geologist and Ice Age expert Louis Agassiz was among the first scientists to realize that between 12,500 and 10,000 years ago, the Champlain Valley was submerged by a body of water. Known as the Champlain Sea, it was formed by surrounding glaciers, which pushed the ground to sea level under their enormous weight, allowing seawater to flood in. As the glaciers melted, the ground rose, and the Champlain Sea ceased to exist. Measuring 12 feet long, about the size of a car, the Charlotte whale is believed to be an adult, although its gender is unknown. While the bones are too damaged for radiocarbon dating, scientists believe the creature lived around 11,000 years ago. Prehistoric remains in downtown Miami. While overseeing the demolition of a parking garage in downtown Miami last year, archaeologists discovered a collection of prehistoric artifacts, including human remains, bone fragments, and pottery shards. City archaeologist Adrian Espinosa Valdor said that one of the artifacts was a human skull that was found nearly 6 feet underground. He said that it was buried deliberately and believes that the objects are connected to the Tequesta Native American tribe that once lived in the area. While it may seem natural to think that archaeological sites and artifacts would have been uncovered before the city was filled with buildings, excavations weren't commonly carried out in the area until after the parking garage was built in 1972. Back then, it wasn't normal like it is now for archaeologists to investigate a site ahead of planned construction. Now it's required by law, and it's become clear through many discoveries that the area near the mouth of the Miami River saw a lot of activity during ancient times. These types of discoveries have created problems for Miami's developers in the past. They often have conflicts and legal battles with Native American groups and preservationists. Battles of this kind have also happened in New York and other cities where Native American historical sites have been discovered. Out-of-place mangrove trees. Scientists were baffled when they learned mangrove trees happen to be growing and thriving about 200 kilometers inland on Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Red mangrove trees grow in saltwater and are typically only found near the ocean in tropical coastal habitats throughout the Americas. Locals have long known about the trees, but experts only learned about their existence relatively recently. Ever since then, they've been trying to figure out how the mangrove trees survived in a freshwater habitat. A team of researchers announced they believed they had come up with the answer after comparing the freshwater mangrove's DNA to samples from the nearest coastal mangrove populations. By examining the differences in the trees' genomes, they determined that the inland mangroves have been isolated in their freshwater environment for roughly 125,000 years. At that time, global temperatures and sea levels were much higher than they are today, leading scientists to believe that the area where the freshwater mangroves now sit was once a coastal region. When the climate cooled and the ocean receded, the trees managed to survive the transition by genetically adapting to the changing environment. It seems surprising that this is even possible, but the mangrove forest is home to several other species that survived extreme environmental changes. It's an extremely unique ecosystem filled with fish, turtles, plant life, and other life forms that were able to survive under vastly challenging circumstances. They did this while the type of habitat they had always known changed completely. Experts don't know how they did this and are continuing to study the site, hoping to learn more about their impressive resilience. A boat in the desert. In 2016, a well-preserved boat was unearthed in the tomb of a high-ranking official in the ancient Egyptian necropolis of Abu Sir. It was remarkably well preserved despite being 4,500 years old, with planks and ropes that were still intact, and it's one of just a handful of ancient Egyptian boats that were found in decent condition. Measuring 60 feet long, about the length of a bowling lane, the valuable cedar boat is an unusually large and lavish grave for a non-royal member of society, and it seems more than slightly out of place in the incredibly hot and dry desert environment. Abu Sir is near the Nile River, which the ancient Egyptians often used for transporting goods and people. Boats became increasingly important throughout the 4th dynasty for their role in international trade and were symbols of state power, according to Texas A&M University researcher Douglas Inglis. Burials in boats were fairly common at certain points during Egypt's Old Kingdom period. It's unknown whether the vessel found at Abu Sir was actually used for sailing. Experts don't know why the Egyptians practiced boat burials, but they believe that they may have been built to serve the dead in the afterlife or to carry their owners on the journey to the hereafter. Thanks for watching. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon. Bye!